All right, welcome. Today we're tackling something that's, well, it's pretty complex and honestly pretty surprising. Divorce law. What does it actually take legally to end a marriage? Because it's really not as simple as just saying, I'm done.
So let me just throw this out there. What in the world could a 360-day pregnancy, a super messy house, and a herd of cats possibly have to do with getting a divorce? Sounds like a weird joke, right? But nope. They've all been key arguments in real divorce cases. And we're going to get into exactly how, looking at some truly fascinating case law.
Okay, so how do we connect the dots from a bunch of cats to a courtroom? Well, here's our game plan. Think of it like a legal gauntlet we've got to run. First up, we'll cover the basics, petitioning the court. Then, we'll dive into the three big reasons, the classic grounds for divorce. That's adultery, cruelty, and desertion. And stick around for the end, because we're going to talk about the hidden traps. These are actions that can completely torpedo your divorce, even if you think you've got a rock-solid case.
All right, let's get into it. First up, that initial hurdle. How do you even get your case in front of a judge in the first place?
Okay, so before a court will even listen to you, you've got to prove four key things. It's like a checklist. First, you have to prove that a valid marriage actually exists and that it's based in the country. Just so you know, the cases we're looking at today come from Ugandan law, so that's the context here. Second, you have to have what the law calls grounds for the divorce. And third, you've got to prove there are no bars, things that could stop the divorce dead in its tracks. Now, don't worry. We're going to unpack what all those grounds and bars actually are.
So, you've jumped through those first hoops. Now you have to prove your grounds. Let's start with the big one, the classic, adultery. I mean, it's probably the oldest reason in the book for ending a marriage, but you'd be surprised at how specific the legal definition really is.
And when I say precise, I mean incredibly precise. This isn't just about cheating in the way we might casually talk about it. Legally, it has to be consensual sexual intercourse. It has to happen while you're married. And in the legal system we're talking about, it has to be with a person of the opposite sex. You miss even one of those ingredients, and from the court's point of view, it's not technically adultery.
So that raises a huge question, right? How on earth do you prove something that, almost always happens behind closed doors? Well, this is where we get back to that wild story about the 360-day pregnancy. There's this unbelievable case, Preston Jones v. Preston Jones. A husband is away for 360 days. He gets back and, surprise, his wife has just had a baby. The court basically said, and this is a direct quote, that it's beyond a reasonable doubt that a baby born 360 days after the last time a couple was together couldn't be his. So they proved adultery through just pure logical impossibility. Incredible.
The takeaway here is that proving adultery in court is really, really tough. The burden of proof is completely on you, the petitioner. And since you're probably not going to have a video, courts have to rely on other things like corroborating stories or really strong circumstantial evidence. And here's the real kicker. You have to have clean hands yourself. You can't accuse your spouse of adultery if you've also committed it. The court just won't hear it.
Okay, moving on to ground number 2, cruelty. Now, the law has a really interesting phrase for this. It has to be more than just the normal wear and tear of marriage. I love that phrase. This isn't about bickering over who takes out the trash. The legal bar is set way, way higher.
And here's how high that bar is. Legal cruelty is defined as any conduct that puts your life, your limbs, or your health in danger. And that includes both bodily and mental health. It can even be just creating a reasonable fear that you're in danger. So we're not talking about someone being mean or unkind. We're talking about genuine, serious harm.
So what does mental cruelty look like in practice? Let me tell you about this case, bravery versus bravery. A husband goes and gets a sterilization procedure done, but he doesn't tell his wife. He does it without her consent. She wanted to have another child, and he secretly took that possibility away from her. The court decided that was an act of cruelty. See, there was no physical violence, but it was a deep, profound attack on her mental well-being and what she thought her marriage was about.
So how does a court figure this out? It's not about one single fight. They look at the big picture, the entire history of the relationship. The behavior has to be really serious, not just petty arguments. It could be things like constant, vicious taunts or false accusations. And what's really fascinating to me is that the court actually looks at the individuals. Your personalities, your backgrounds, your social standing, all of it matters in deciding if what happened was truly cruel in the context of your specific marriage.
All right, on to our third and final ground, desertion. Now, this sounds pretty straightforward, right? Someone just packs their bags and leaves. But legally, it's way more than that. It's about abandoning the marriage in fact and in spirit.
To make a case for desertion, you've got to check off every box on this list. Step 1, your spouse physically leaves. There's an actual separation. But here's the crucial part. Step 2, you have to prove they intended to desert you, to end the marriage for good. The law has a fancy Latin term for it, animus diserendi. Step 3, this whole situation has to go on for at least 2 straight years. And finally, it has to be without a good reason and without you agreeing to it. It's a high bar to clear.
Okay, but what if no one actually walks out the door, but the marriage is effectively dead? This is where the law gets really clever, with a concept called constructive desertion. It's when one person's behavior is so awful, so unbearable, that it's legally the same as if they kicked the other person out. So get this, the spouse who stays behind can actually be the one to claim they were deserted. It's a total reversal. But proving this, it's incredibly difficult. Let's go back to our weird examples from the beginning. Remember the dirty house? In that case, a wife was, well, let's just say not the tidiest person. But the court said that's not constructive desertion. Why? Because there was no proof she was being messy on purpose to drive her husband away. And what about the herd of cats? Same thing. The wife clearly preferred her cats to her husband, but again, the court said there was no proof her intention was to end the marriage. So the key takeaway isn't about the bad behavior itself, it's all about proving that specific intent to drive the other person out.
Okay, we've run through the grounds, but we're at the last and maybe most dangerous part of the legal gauntlet. This is like a minefield. These are actions that can totally block a divorce. I mean, you could have a perfect case for cruelty or desertion, but if you've done one of these things, the court can just say, nope, case dismissed.
So there are 3 of these major bars you have to watch out for. First, there is collusion. That's pretty simple. It's when you and your spouse team up to lie to the court. You invent a story just to get divorced. Big no-no. Second is connivance. This is a bit sneakier. It's when you actually encourage or give a wink and a nod to the thing you're now complaining about. And third is condonation. This basically means you've forgiven the offense. The classic example is getting back together and acting like a married couple again after you found out about it. If you do any of these things, you pretty much forfeit your right to get the divorce on those grounds.
And you need to know the law is absolutely brutal on this stuff. Take a look at the actual language from the Divorce Act. It says a petition shall be dismissed if there's collusion. That word shall is not might be or could be. It means it's a done deal. The judge has no choice. Your case is over.
So, we've been through it all. Adultery, cruelty, desertion, and all the traps that can stop a divorce cold. After all that, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When the law puts this much effort into defining exactly how a marriage can end, what is it trying to tell us about how a marriage is supposed to work? It's a big question. Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me.